The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with the familiar sound of 1,000 different species communicating in their native tongues. Translator devices hummed softly, converting the chaos into understandable speech for each delegate. At the center of the massive circular hall, a holographic display showed the current topic of discussion: a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Ambassador Kethvar of the Andromedan Alliance adjusted his ceremonial robes and stood to address the assembly. His forearms gestured dramatically as he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of galactic politics. "Honored delegates," he began, his tone dripping with barely concealed amusement. "We gather today to discuss the amusing situation developing in the Sol system. The inhabitants of the third planet, who call themselves humans, have had the audacity to refuse our generous offer of protection." A ripple of laughter spread through the chamber. The vegan representative, a tall being with crystalline skin that refracted light in beautiful patterns, chimed in with their musical voice. "Protection? Kethvar, surely you mean vassalage. These humans seem to think they can stand alone against the might of established galactic powers." From across the hall, the deep, rumbling voice of General Thokmar rose above the chatter. The Ursine warrior species had conquered 17 systems in the past century alone, and his reputation preceded him wherever he went. Perhaps we should simply take what we want from their system. Their technology is primitive, their military laughable. A single battlecruiser could subjugate their entire species. The human representative, Ambassador Sarah Chun, sat quietly in the designated area for developing civilizations. Her small delegation of 3 advisors looked distinctly uncomfortable, surrounded by beings who could crush their ship with a thought. Sarah herself maintained her composure, though her knuckles were white as she gripped the edge of her desk. "The humans claim their system is under Earth Defense Force protection," continued Kethvar, consulting his data pad with exaggerated care. "They've established patrol routes, built defense stations, and even have the nerve to scan our ships when we enter their space. As if their primitive sensors could detect anything we didn't want them to see." The crystalline delegate's laughter tinkled like breaking glass. "I've reviewed their military specifications. Chemical rockets, kinetic weapons, primitive fusion reactors. It's almost quaint, like watching children play at war." Ambassador Chen finally stood, her voice steady despite the overwhelming odds against her. "Honored delegates, Earth appreciates your interest in our system. However, we must respectfully decline any offers that compromise our sovereignty. We've been monitoring galactic politics for the past 50 years, and we've learned from your examples." This statement caused an uproar. Species that had been at war with each other for millennia suddenly found common ground in their astonishment at human arrogance. General Thokmar's roar of laughter shook the chamber's reinforced walls. "Learn from our examples?" he bellowed. "Child, your species has barely left its cradle world. You have no understanding of the forces at work in this galaxy. The Draconian Empire alone commands a fleet of 10,000 ships, each one capable of glassing your entire planet." At the mention of the Draconians, a subtle tension filled the room. Even among these powerful species, the Draconian Empire commanded respect through fear. Their ships were works of art and instruments of destruction, powered by exotic matter drives, and armed with weapons that could crack continents. The Draconian representative, Lord Zephyr Thane, had remained silent throughout the proceedings. His species resembled Earth's dragons of legend, though they stood upright and possessed a cruel intelligence that had dominated their corner of the galaxy for 3,000 years. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "The human speaks of sovereignty as if it were a birthright," Lord Zephyr Thane said, his scaled lips pulling back to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth. "Sovereignty must be earned, little primate. It must be defended. Your pathetic fleet of chemical rockets and metal ships is no more threatening than insects buzzing around a giant." Sarah Chen's jaw tightened, but she maintained her diplomatic facade. "Lord Zephyr Thane, with respect, we've observed your empire's expansion methods. The Centauri colonies, the vegan mining operations, the Andromedan research stations. In each case, you offered protection, then gradually assumed control. We prefer to chart our own course." The dragon-like being's eyes narrowed to golden slits. And if your course leads to conflict with superior powers? What then, human? Then, we'll face that conflict with the same determination that brought us from caves to stars in 10,000 years, Sarah replied firmly. We may be young by galactic standards, but we're not naive. This response drew more laughter from the assembly. The Andromedan ambassador waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. 10,000 years. Some of our civilizations have existed for millions of years. You speak of determination as if it were a uniquely human trait. Perhaps, Sarah conceded. But our determination has a particular quality that you might not have encountered before. The vegan delegate leaned forward with interest. And what quality is that, young human? Sarah's smile was cold and calculating. We have nothing to lose and everything to prove. Every other species in this chamber achieved their current status through conquest, inheritance, or natural advantages. Humans got here by being too stubborn to quit when any reasonable species would have given up. The chamber fell silent for a moment as delegates processed this statement. General Thakmar broke the silence with another rumbling laugh. Stubbornness is not a military strategy, human. When the first Draconian battle group arrives in your system, your determination will not stop their quantum torpedoes from turning your cities to glass. Lord Zephyrthane's scaled head tilted slightly, studying the human ambassador with new interest. Perhaps we should test this human determination. I propose a demonstration of Draconian naval power. A single battle group will visit the Sol system to observe these defensive capabilities firsthand. The suggestion sent ripples of anticipation through the chamber. Many delegates had never seen Draconian ships in action, and fewer still had witnessed the Empire's military might directed against an unaligned system. Your battle group will be monitored from the moment it enters our space, Sarah warned. We may be outgunned, but we're not blind. The Draconian Lord's laughter was like the sound of tearing metal. Monitor away, little primate. Your primitive sensors will provide adequate entertainment for my crews as they demonstrate the futility of resistance. Ambassador Chun gathered her data pads and stood to leave. Then, we understand each other perfectly, Lord Zephyrthane. You intend to intimidate Earth into submission. We intend to defend our home and our freedom. The galaxy will see which intention proves stronger. As the human delegation departed, the remaining delegates continued their discussions with renewed interest. The prospect of watching the mighty Draconian Empire crush an upstart species was too entertaining to ignore. 3 days later, the first reports reached the Galactic Council. A Draconian battle group consisting of 12 heavy cruisers for dreadnoughts, and the flagship destroyer, Void's Edge, had departed from their staging area near the Rigel system. The fleet's destination was officially listed as patrol and reconnaissance, but everyone understood the true purpose. The journey to Sol would take 6 standard days using Draconian exotic matter drives. During this time, betting pools opened across civilized space. The odds heavily favored a complete human surrender within hours of the fleet's arrival. Some optimistic bookmakers offered odds on Earth lasting a full day against Draconian firepower. Meanwhile, in the Sol system, Earth's defenses prepared for what many believed would be their final stand. The Earth Defense Force had grown substantially in the 50 years since first contact with the galactic community. What had begun as a hastily assembled collection of converted civilian ships and orbital weapons platforms had evolved into something more sophisticated, though still primitive by galactic standards. Admiral Rebecca Martinez stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching the tactical displays that showed Earth's current defensive posture. 37 ships of various classes patrolled the outer system, while another 43 remained in close orbit around Earth and Mars. The numbers looked impressive until compared to what was coming their way. Admiral, called out Lieutenant Commander Jackson from his position at the sensor station, we're receiving updated intelligence from our deep space monitoring posts. The Draconian fleet is maintaining standard approach vectors and will arrive in approximately 72 hours. Admiral Martinez nodded grimly. Any changes to their formation or behavior? No, ma'am. They're not attempting stealth or deception. They want us to see them coming. The Admiral turned to address her staff. Ladies and gentlemen, we've trained for this moment for 5 decades. Every simulation, every exercise, every technological development has been leading to this confrontation. The Draconians believe their reputation alone will force our surrender. She paused, studying the faces of her officers. These were the children and grandchildren of Earth's first space pioneers, raised on stories of human persistence and ingenuity. They had never known a time when humanity was considered anything more than a galactic curiosity. They're about to learn, Admiral Martinez continued. That reputation is earned in battle, not in council chambers. Our job is not to defeat their fleet outright. Our job is to make them pay such a price for victory that other species will think twice before testing human resolve. The preparation that followed was methodical and thorough. Supply ships moved ammunition and spare parts to forward positions. Medical facilities prepared for casualties. Communications networks checked and double-checked their encryption protocols. But perhaps the most important preparation was psychological. Throughout the Sol system, human crews settled into the mindset that had carried their species from Earth's surface to the stars. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and facing an enemy with 3,000 years of military tradition. By any rational calculation, they should surrender immediately. Instead, they sharpened their weapons and waited. The galaxy watched and waited too. Long-range sensors tracked the Draconian fleet's progress, while news networks prepared coverage of what promised to be the shortest military campaign in recent galactic history. In the Galactic Council chambers, delegates placed final bets and made small talk about human stubbornness. The general consensus was that the battle would be over before it truly began, with the humans wisely choosing survival over pointless heroics. None of them suspected that they were about to witness the beginning of a legend that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. The Draconians had faced countless enemies throughout their rise to power, but they had never faced an enemy with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. As the countdown to contact continued, both sides made their final preparations, unaware that the approaching battle would mark the beginning of humanity's transformation from galactic curiosity to galactic force. The Draconian fleet dropped out of exotic matter drive at the edge of the Sol system with the subtle grace of apex predators entering new hunting grounds. Lord Admiral Kithierathane, cousin to the Empire's representative on the Galactic Council, stood on the bridge of the flagship Void's Edge and surveyed the primitive system before him. Navigation, report, he commanded, his golden eyes scanning the tactical displays that showed the positions of human ships and installations throughout the system. My Lord Admiral, responded the navigation officer, a smaller Draconian with intricate scale patterns denoting his technical specialization. We have successfully translated to the system's edge. Human monitoring stations have detected our arrival, as expected. We're receiving multiple scan attempts from their primitive sensors. Lord Admiral Kithirathane's scaled lips curved in what passed for a smile among his species. Of course they're scanning us. Let them look. Let them see the futility of their position. He turned to his communications officer. Open a channel to all human vessels and installations. It's time to deliver the Empire's terms. The communications officer's claws danced across his console with practiced ease. Channel open, my Lord Admiral. All human military frequencies are receiving our signal. Humans of the Sol system, Lord Admiral Kithierathane began, his voice carrying the authority of 3 millennia of unquestioned Draconian supremacy. I am Lord Admiral Kithierathane of the Draconian Empire. My battle group consists of 17 ships, each one more powerful than your entire fleet combined. I offer you this single opportunity to surrender with honor intact. He paused dramatically, allowing the weight of his words to sink in throughout human space. Submit to Imperial protection, and your species will be granted autonomous status within the Empire. Continue this feudal resistance, and witness the power that has conquered 1,000 worlds. The response came from Admiral Martinez at Luna Base, her voice steady despite facing impossible odds. Lord Admiral, this is Admiral Rebecca Martinez of the Earth Defense Force. We appreciate your offer, but Earth's answer remains unchanged. This system is under human sovereignty, and we will defend it. The Draconian Lord's eyes narrowed with genuine surprise. Throughout his military career, which spanned over 400 years, he had never encountered a species that maintained defiance when faced with overwhelming Draconian firepower. Admiral Martinez, he replied, his tone shifting from diplomatic formality to barely restrained menace. You command perhaps 80 ships against my 17. Yet my smallest escort vessel carries more firepower than your largest dreadnought. Do you truly intend to sacrifice your entire fleet for the sake of pride? Pride has nothing to do with it. Admiral Martinez responded firmly. This is about the right of humanity to determine its own destiny. If that right must be defended with blood, then so be it. Lord Admiral Kithiarathane turned to his tactical officer, a scarred veteran of the Centauri campaigns. Show me their deployment, Battlemaster. The tactical display illuminated with symbols representing human ships and installations. The Draconians studied the formation with professional interest, noting defensive positions around major planets and the concentration of forces near Earth itself. Interesting, murmured the Battlemaster. They've positioned their heaviest ships in a defensive shell around their homeworld. Classic protection formation, though primitive in execution. Analysis, the Lord Admiral requested. Their positioning suggests they intend to make us fight through multiple defensive layers to reach Earth, the Battlemaster explained. Each layer will force us to engage their fleet piecemeal, allowing them to concentrate fire on isolated vessels. Lord Admiral Kithiarathane's claws tapped against his command throne's armrests. A sound strategy for a weaker force. They hope to inflict casualties through attrition rather than seeking decisive battle. Shall I order the fleet to advance, my Lord Admiral? Not yet, came the unexpected reply. First, let us demonstrate what they face. Weapons, target their outermost monitoring station. Single quantum torpedo, minimum yield. The weapons officer's hands moved across his console with deadly precision. Target acquired, my Lord Admiral. Monitoring station Delta 7, range 800,000 kilometers. Quantum torpedo loaded and ready. Fire. The torpedo launch was almost anticlimactic. A brief flash of exotic matter ignition, followed by the torpedo's transit time of 12 seconds. The human monitoring station, a small facility with a crew of 15, simply ceased to exist. Where once there had been metal and ceramic and human ingenuity, now there was only expanding plasma. Throughout the Sol system, human crews watched their sensors as one of their installations vanished without warning. The message was clear: surrender or face annihilation. Admiral Martinez's voice carried across all frequencies moments later. All units, Station Delta 7 has been destroyed. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. Execute defensive plan Omega. The human response was immediate and coordinated. Ships that had been in loose patrol formations suddenly tightened into battle groups. Defensive platforms that had been powered down came online with weapons hot. Throughout the system, humanity prepared for war. Lord Admiral Kithiarathane watched the human fleet's reorganization with growing respect. Despite being outclassed in every category, they moved with the precision of a well-drilled military force. They're surprisingly professional, observed the Battlemaster. No panic, no breakdown in communications. They're treating this as a tactical problem rather than a death sentence. Indeed, the Lord Admiral agreed. Perhaps they deserve the honor of facing our full capabilities rather than simply being swept aside. He opened the communications channel once more. Admiral Martinez, you have witnessed a small demonstration of Draconian power. Your monitoring station was destroyed by a single torpedo set to minimum yield. Our main weapons operate at 50 times that power level. Will you reconsider your position? Admiral Martinez's response was immediate. Lord Admiral, humanity has faced extinction before. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that would have broken other species. Your weapons are impressive, but they don't change the fundamental equation. This is our home, and we will defend it. Then, you force me to demonstrate the consequences of defiance. Lord Admiral Kithiarathane replied grimly. All ships, advance to attack positions. We will show them what 3,000 years of military evolution can accomplish. The Draconian fleet moved forward with the coordinated precision of apex predators. Each ship was a masterwork of engineering and warfare, bristling with weapons that could shatter moons and armor that could withstand stellar temperatures. Their exotic matter drives allowed for maneuvers that defied conventional physics, while their quantum sensors could detect enemies across light years of space. The human fleet moved to intercept, their chemical rockets and fusion engines seeming pathetic by comparison. Yet there was something in their formation, something in the way they positioned themselves between the Draconians and Earth, that spoke to a determination that went beyond mere military doctrine. The first engagement came when the human destroyer Defiant moved to block the Draconian advance. The small ship, barely 200 meters long, fired its entire payload of nuclear missiles at the approaching enemy fleet. The Draconian point defense systems eliminated the missiles with casual efficiency, automated lasers tracking and destroying each warhead long before they could pose a threat. But the human captain wasn't finished. As his ship closed to knife-fighting range, he activated the Defiant's experimental ramming prow and accelerated directly toward the nearest Draconian escort. Interesting tactic, observed the Battlemaster. They're using their ship as a projectile. Primitive, but potentially effective if they can achieve contact. They won't, Lord Admiral Kithirathane replied confidently. Escort Vessel 7. Eliminate the incoming human ship. The Draconian escort's response was swift and decisive. A single particle beam, fired at quarter power, struck the Defiant amidships. The human destroyer's hull superheated instantly, its armor plating turning molten under the assault. Yet the ship continued its attack run even as its hull began to break apart. Remarkable, the Draconian weapons officer murmured. Their ship is destroyed, but they're maintaining course. The crew must know they're dead. The Defiant struck the Draconian escort at full ramming speed, its reinforced prow designed specifically for this moment. The impact sent shockwaves through both vessels, but the Draconian ship's superior armor and structural integrity allowed it to survive with moderate damage. The Defiant was obliterated, its crew of 47 dying instantly. Throughout the Sol system, human crews watched their first ship die and felt their resolve harden rather than break. The Defiant had demonstrated something important. Draconian ships could be hurt. They could be damaged. They were not invincible. First blood to the humans, Admiral Martinez announced over secure communications. The Defiant proved that Draconian armor can be breached. Adjust tactics accordingly. What followed was unlike any battle the Draconians had ever fought. Instead of the quick, decisive engagement they expected, they found themselves drawn into a grinding campaign of attrition. Human ships attacked in small groups, using their superior numbers to swarm individual Draconian vessels. When outgunned, they rammed. When outnumbered, they used the system's asteroid fields and planetary rings as cover. Each human ship that died took pieces of Draconian vessels with it. Nuclear missiles, kinetic projectiles, and desperate ramming attacks slowly accumulated damage on the seemingly invincible fleet. The Draconians found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to acknowledge the hopelessness of their situation. Status report. Lord Admiral Kithirathane commanded as the battle entered its 6th hour. Escort vessels 3 and 7 are reporting moderate damage, the Battlemaster replied. Heavy Cruiser 4 has lost her port weapons array to a coordinated missile attack. No ships lost, but we're accumulating damage faster than anticipated. The Lord Admiral studied the tactical display with growing confusion. By all conventional measures, his fleet was winning decisively. They had destroyed 28 human ships while suffering no losses of their own. Yet something felt wrong about the engagement. Their tactics are unusual, he observed. They're not trying to win in any conventional sense. They're trying to hurt us as badly as possible before dying. It's almost as if they're fighting for an audience, the Battlemaster agreed. Every attack is designed for maximum visible damage rather than tactical advantage. What neither Draconian officer realized was that their assessment was absolutely correct. The human fleet wasn't fighting to win the battle, they were fighting to send a message to the galaxy. Every damaged Draconian ship, every moment of resistance, every act of courage was being broadcast across civilized space. In the Galactic Council chambers, delegates who had gathered to watch a quick Draconian victory found themselves witnessing something entirely different. The humans were losing, as expected, but they were making the Draconians pay for every kilometer of space, every destroyed ship, every life taken. This is remarkable, whispered the vegan delegate, their crystalline form refracting emergency lighting as they leaned forward to study the battle reports. They're actually damaging Draconian ships. Ambassador Kethvar of the Andromedan Alliance felt his earlier amusement evaporating as he watched the tactical displays. Those aren't random acts of desperation. They have a plan. Every attack is coordinated, every sacrifice calculated for maximum effect. General Thokmar's expression had shifted from amusement to professional respect. His own species understood the value of tactical sacrifice, but this was something different. This was an entire species choosing to die on their feet rather than live on their knees. The battle continued to rage throughout the Sol system, and, with each passing hour, the galaxy's perception of humanity began to change. They were no longer the amusing primitives who thought they could stand against their betters. They were warriors defending their home with a courage that forced even their enemies to acknowledge their strength. But the greatest revelation was yet to come. Lord Admiral Kithirathane stood motionless on his bridge as the battle entered its 18th hour. What should have been a demonstration of Draconian supremacy had become something else entirely. His fleet had destroyed 47 human vessels, but the cost was becoming troubling. 3 of his escorts required immediate repair. His flagship had taken structural damage from a coordinated nuclear barrage, and, worst of all, the humans showed no signs of surrender. "My Lord Admiral," the communications officer reported, his voice carefully neutral. "We're receiving priority communications from the Galactic Council. Multiple ambassadors are requesting immediate updates on our progress." The Lord Admiral's golden eyes narrowed. Progress. The word felt hollow when describing what was happening in the Sol system. Yes, they were winning, but victory was proving far more expensive than anyone had anticipated. "Tell the Council that operations are proceeding as planned," he responded curtly. "The human fleet is being systematically destroyed." What he didn't mention was that the human fleet was taking pieces of his battle group with them as they died. Each engagement taught the humans something new about Draconian tactics, and they adapted with frightening speed. The latest human innovation was particularly troubling. Instead of engaging his ships directly, they had begun using their system's asteroid belt as a weapons platform. Human engineers had spent the past 12 hours converting mining charges into improvised nuclear mines, turning the entire belt into a lethal obstacle course. "Sensors detect multiple detonations in Grid 77 Alpha," reported the tactical officer. "Escort Vessel 9 reports moderate damage from a nuclear mine concealed within a metallic asteroid." "How are they hiding nuclear warheads from our sensors?" demanded the Lord Admiral. "They're using the asteroid's natural composition to mask the mine's energy signature," explained the science officer, a lean Draconian with the intricate geometric scale patterns of the technical caste. "Iron and nickel ore creates natural interference that disrupts our quantum sensors at close range." Lord Admiral Kithirathane felt a grudging respect for human ingenuity beginning to form. Throughout the Empire's expansion, they had faced species with superior technology, overwhelming numbers, or natural advantages that made them formidable opponents. But they had never faced an enemy that could turn disadvantages into advantages through pure creativity. "Sir," the communications officer called out urgently, "we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Martinez. She's requesting to speak with you directly." "Put her through," the Lord Admiral commanded. Perhaps the humans were finally ready to discuss surrender terms. Admiral Martinez's image appeared on the main display, her uniform torn and her face bearing the stress of continuous combat operations. Behind her, the Luna Base Command Center showed clear signs of damage from long-range bombardment. "Lord Admiral," she began, her voice steady despite her exhaustion, "I want to propose a temporary ceasefire." The Draconian Lord felt a moment of satisfaction. Finally, human reason was asserting itself over human stubbornness. "Admiral, I am prepared to discuss surrender terms. Your fleet has fought with unexpected courage, and the Empire recognizes bravery even in our enemies." To his surprise, Admiral Martinez shook her head firmly. "Not surrender, Lord Admiral. I want to show you something that might interest you." Before Lord Admiral Kithirathane could respond, new contacts appeared on his tactical display. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, but these weren't human vessels. The sensor profiles matched Andromedan design specifications. What is this? The Lord Admiral demanded. Reinforcements, Admiral Martinez replied with a grim smile. 3 hours ago, the Andromedan Alliance voted to provide military assistance to Earth. Something about honoring treaties with developing civilizations. The Lord Admiral's claws extended involuntarily. The Andromedans had never shown interest in human affairs before. Their sudden intervention suggested that the galaxy's perception of this conflict was changing in ways the Draconian Empire had not anticipated. The Andromedans are making a serious mistake, Lord Admiral Kithierathane warned. The Empire's response to their interference will be comprehensive. Perhaps, Admiral Martinez acknowledged. But they're not alone. More contacts appeared on the sensors. Ships bearing the crystalline signatures of the vegan collective were translating into the system. Behind them came vessels from a dozen smaller species, all flying under the banner of the newly formed Soul Defense Coalition. Lord Admiral Kithierathane felt the tactical situation shifting beneath his feet like sand in a storm. What had begun as a simple demonstration of draconian power was becoming a galactic crisis. Half the Council species were now actively opposing the Empire's actions, while the other half watched to see how events would develop. You see, Lord Admiral, Admiral Martinez continued, something interesting happened while we were fighting. The galaxy was watching. They saw human ships ramming Draconian cruisers. They saw our pilots flying suicide missions to protect Earth. They saw determination in the face of hopeless odds. She paused, studying the Draconian Lord's expression. But, more importantly, they saw Draconian ships taking damage. They saw your escorts limping away for repairs. They saw that the mighty Draconian Empire could be hurt by inferior technology and superior courage. The implications struck Lord Admiral Kithierathane like a physical blow. For 3,000 years, Draconian supremacy had been maintained through the perception of invincibility. Enemy species surrendered rather than face certain defeat. Rebellions ended before they began because resistance seemed futile. Now, broadcast across civilized space, the galaxy had witnessed Draconian ships being damaged by primitive human weapons. The Empire's aura of invincibility had been cracked, and other species were moving quickly to exploit that crack. You understand what you've done, he said quietly. You've started a galactic war. No, Admiral Martinez replied firmly. We've ended 3,000 years of enforced peace through intimidation. The galaxy is finally free to choose its own path. Before the Lord Admiral could respond, his tactical officer announced new developments. Sir, we're detecting additional fleet movements throughout the galaxy. Multiple species are mobilizing their naval forces. Show me, the Lord Admiral commanded. The tactical display expanded to show fleet movements across known space. The picture that emerged was deeply troubling for Draconian interests. Species that had remained neutral for centuries were suddenly forming alliances. Long-suppressed independence movements were declaring their freedom. The carefully maintained balance of galactic power was collapsing. Admiral Martinez, Lord Admiral Kithierathane, said slowly, "You've doomed your species. Even if every fleet in the galaxy came to your aid, the Empire has resources you cannot imagine. When this conflict ends, humanity will cease to exist." Maybe, she acknowledged. But humanity has never been good at calculating odds. We've always been better at changing them. As if summoned by her words, alarms began sounding throughout the Draconian flagship. The tactical officer's voice carried a note of disbelief as he made his report. My Lord Admiral, we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the Sol system. The humans are activating something big. Specify, the Lord Admiral demanded. Unknown energy sources are coming online throughout the asteroid belt, around Jupiter's moons, and in the outer system. The power readings are unprecedented. Admiral Martinez's smile became predatory. Did you really think we spent 50 years preparing for this moment without developing a few surprises? Every mining operation, every research station, every seemingly innocent installation in our system has been building toward this day. The sensors showed energy readings that defied explanation. Fusion reactors that had been dormant for decades were suddenly operating at maximum output. Mining facilities were channeling power into previously unknown systems. Throughout the Sol system, humanity was revealing capabilities that they had kept carefully hidden. What have you built? Lord Admiral Kithierathane asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer would be both ingenious and terrifying. Insurance, Admiral Martinez replied simply. We knew we couldn't match Draconian technology ship to ship, so we built something different. Something that plays to our strengths rather than yours. The first indication of what humanity had been building came when sensors detected massive gravitational anomalies forming throughout the system. Space itself began to twist and bend as hidden installations activated exotic matter generators of unprecedented scale. Impossible, breathed the science officer. They're generating artificial gravity wells. The power requirements alone should be beyond their technological capabilities. Unless they've been building for 50 years, Admiral Martinez pointed out. Every fusion reactor, every solar collector, every power source in our system has been designed with this moment in mind. We call it the solar defense grid. The gravitational anomalies weren't random. They formed a complex pattern that transformed the Sol system into a three-dimensional maze of gravity wells and hyperspace interdiction fields. Ships attempting to maneuver found their courses altered by invisible forces. Faster-than-light travel became impossible within the grid's influence. You've turned your entire system into a weapon, Lord Admiral Kithirathane observed with growing admiration and alarm. We've turned our system into a fortress, Admiral Martinez corrected. Every asteroid, every moon, every planet is now part of our defensive network. You wanted to see what human determination could accomplish? This is what 50 years of human engineering looks like when we have something worth defending. The solar defense grid was unlike anything in galactic military history. Instead of building a few powerful weapons, humanity had turned their entire star system into an interconnected defensive network. Ships could hide within the grid's gravitational shadows. Weapons platforms drew power from the system's star itself. Communication networks ensured that every component could coordinate with every other component in real time. Most importantly, the grid was designed to be self-repairing and adaptive. Damaged sections could be quickly rebuilt using automated manufacturing systems hidden throughout the asteroid belt. New defensive positions could be established within hours as circumstances required. My Lord Admiral, the tactical officer reported with barely concealed panic. Our exotic matter drives are experiencing severe interference. Navigation controls are responding erratically. All ships are reporting similar problems, added the communications officer. The gravitational distortions are disrupting our drive systems. Lord Admiral Kithirathane realized with mounting horror that the humans had found a way to negate the Draconian Empire's primary tactical advantage. Exotic matter drives that could normally outmaneuver any enemy were now operating at reduced efficiency, while the artificial gravity wells made precise navigation nearly impossible. You've trapped us, he said quietly. We've leveled the playing field, Admiral Martinez replied. Your ships are still more powerful than ours individually, but now we're all fighting in the same conditions. No more hit-and-run attacks. No more superior maneuverability. Just ship-to-ship combat in close quarters. As if to emphasize her point, human ships began emerging from concealment throughout the asteroid belt. They had been hiding within the grid's gravitational shadows, invisible to Draconian sensors until they chose to reveal themselves. The human fleet that the Draconians thought they had nearly destroyed was actually larger than originally estimated. You hid ships within your own defensive network, Lord Admiral Kithirathane observed. We hid everything within our defensive network, Admiral Martinez confirmed. Ships, weapons, manufacturing facilities, command centers. For the past 50 years, we've been building a fortress that spans our entire star system. The battle was about to enter a new phase, one that would test both human determination and Draconian supremacy under completely different conditions. The galaxy watched with growing fascination as the conflict that had begun as a simple demonstration of superior firepower transformed into something unprecedented in galactic military history. The solar defense grid's activation transformed the battle into something beyond conventional galactic warfare. Lord Admiral Kithirathane found himself commanding a fleet of 17 ships trapped within a three-dimensional labyrinth of artificial gravity wells, while hidden human forces emerged from concealment throughout the system. Tactical analysis, he commanded, his voice steady despite the deteriorating situation. The battlemaster studied his displays with professional focus. Our exotic matter drives are operating at 30% efficiency due to gravitational interference. Hyperspace translation is impossible within the grid's influence. We're effectively limited to conventional thrust and maneuvering, which puts us on equal footing with human vessels, the Lord Admiral observed grimly. Not entirely equal, the science officer interjected. Our ships still maintain superior armor, shielding, and weapons. However, the tactical advantages that have defined Draconian naval supremacy have been neutralized. Through the main display, they watched as human ships moved through the solar defense grid with practiced ease. 50 years of preparation had taught them to navigate their own gravitational maze with deadly efficiency. They're using the grid like a three-dimensional highway system, the tactical officer reported. Human ships can travel along predetermined routes that avoid the worst gravitational distortions, while we're forced to fight the currents. Admiral Martinez's voice cut through the tactical chatter. Lord Admiral, you're welcome to surrender at any time. We'll guarantee safe passage for your crews to the edge of our system. The Draconian Lord's laughter was harsh and bitter. Admiral, you've demonstrated remarkable ingenuity and courage, but you're still outgunned. Even under these conditions, Draconian firepower will eventually overwhelm your defenses. Eventually, she agreed. But how many ships will you lose in the process? And, more importantly, how long do you think the Draconian Empire can maintain its reputation for invincibility after today's demonstration? The question struck at the heart of Draconian power. Throughout galactic history, the Empire had relied on overwhelming displays of force to cow potential enemies into submission. Species surrendered rather than face certain destruction. But if word spread that humans had trapped and bloodied a Draconian fleet, that fear-based compliance would begin to crumble. Sir, the communications officer announced, we're receiving transmissions from the Imperial High Command. They're demanding a full tactical assessment. Tell them the situation is complex. Lord Admiral Kithirathane replied carefully. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that were not anticipated. What he didn't say was that he was beginning to understand the true scope of human strategy. This wasn't just about defending the Sol system. This was about changing the galaxy's perception of what was possible. Every moment the battle continued, every Draconian ship that took damage, every human act of defiance was being broadcast to species that had never dared to challenge established power. The battle that resumed within the solar defense grid was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Without their superior maneuverability, Draconian ships were forced to engage human forces in brutal close-quarters combat. The humans had planned for exactly this scenario. Human ships emerged from asteroid fields like ancient predators, their weapons designed for maximum effect at close range. Nuclear missiles that would normally be intercepted by point defense found their targets in the chaotic gravitational environment. Kinetic projectiles fired from concealed positions struck Draconian vessels before their crews could respond. Heavy Cruiser 7 is reporting critical damage to their main drive section, the tactical officer announced. They're requesting permission to withdraw for emergency repairs. Negative, Lord Admiral Kithirathane responded. All ships maintain formation. We cannot show weakness now. But the damage was accumulating faster than anticipated. The human strategy was becoming clear. Instead of seeking decisive victories, they were bleeding the Draconian fleet through 1,000 small wounds. Each engagement cost humanity ships they could barely afford to lose, but it also degraded Draconian combat effectiveness. The turning point came when the human heavy cruiser, Indomitable, executed a maneuver that defied conventional tactical wisdom. Using the solar defense grid's gravitational currents, the ship accelerated beyond safe limits directly toward the Draconian flagship. Intercept course confirmed, reported the tactical officer. The human vessel is on a collision trajectory with our position. Lord Admiral Kithirathane watched the approaching ship with professional admiration. Analysis of their intentions? Unknown, sir. Their current acceleration profile will result in structural failure before they reach ramming distance. The answer came when the Indomitable reached critical velocity and, suddenly, broke apart in a controlled detonation. But this wasn't a simple ramming attack. The ship's destruction created a debris field of highly radioactive material that the solar defense grid's gravitational currents spread throughout the local combat area. Radiological hazard detected, announced the science officer. The human ship was carrying nuclear waste material. Their controlled destruction has contaminated the local space with high-energy particles. Clever, admitted the battlemaster. They're using their own ship's destruction to deny us maneuvering room. Our shields can handle the radiation, but it's degrading our sensor efficiency. Throughout the Sol system, similar tactics were being employed. Human ships used the gravitational maze to execute attacks that would have been impossible in open space. They fired weapons around gravitational lenses that bent particle beams in unexpected directions. They used asteroid impacts to create debris fields that masked their movements. Most importantly, they demonstrated a level of tactical coordination that surprised their enemies. Every human action seemed calculated to support broader strategic objectives. Ships that died buying time for others to reach better positions. Weapons platforms that fired once and relocated before return fire could arrive. A defensive network that adapted and evolved in real time. They're fighting like a single organism, observed the battlemaster. Every unit coordinates with every other unit. When we destroy one component, the others adjust to compensate. It's their command and control network, the science officer explained. The solar defense grid isn't just a weapons platform. It's a communications system that links every human unit in real time. They're sharing tactical information instantaneously across the entire system. Lord Admiral Kithirathane studied the tactical displays with growing unease. The human network was unlike any military system the Draconians had encountered. Instead of rigid command hierarchies, it allowed for flexible response to changing conditions. Local commanders could adapt to circumstances while maintaining coordination with the overall defensive strategy. Sir, the communications officer reported urgently, we're receiving priority transmissions from multiple sources throughout the galaxy. Other Draconian fleets are reporting similar resistance from species they had previously considered pacified. The Lord Admiral felt his blood turn cold. Specify. The Centauri colonies have declared independence and are resisting imperial governance. The Andromedan Alliance has formally withdrawn from the Draconian sphere of influence. 3 minor species in the Vega sector have formed a defensive pact against imperial expansion. The implications were staggering. Humanity's resistance was inspiring rebellion throughout Draconian space. The Empire's carefully maintained control was unraveling as species that had been suppressed for generations suddenly found the courage to resist. This is more than military defeat, Lord Admiral Kithirathane realized aloud. This is the collapse of imperial authority. Admiral Martinez's voice cut through his thoughts. Lord Admiral, you're receiving reports from across the galaxy, aren't you? Other species are following humanity's example. You've started a rebellion that will cost millions of lives, he accused. We've ended 3,000 years of tyranny, she replied firmly. The galaxy is finally free to choose its own path. As if to punctuate her words, sensors detected new arrivals at the edge of the Sol system. More fleets were arriving to support Earth's defense, including ships from species the Draconians had never seen before. The galaxy's minor powers were revealing hidden capabilities as they joined humanity's cause. Lord Admiral, the tactical officer announced, long-range sensors detect 17 new fleets entering the system. Combined strength estimate, over 400 ships. The numbers were overwhelming. What had begun as a simple punitive expedition was becoming the largest fleet engagement in galactic history. Worse, the Draconian Empire was now outnumbered by a coalition of species they had dismissed as insignificant. Sir, the communications officer added, we're receiving surrender terms from the coalition fleet commanders. They're offering us terms? The battlemaster asked incredulously. Honorable withdrawal from Sol system space, Admiral Martinez explained. Your ships will be escorted to the edge of the system and allowed to depart without further interference. In exchange, the Draconian Empire formally recognizes human sovereignty and agrees to non-interference in coalition affairs. Lord Admiral Kithirathane considered the offer carefully. His fleet was trapped, outnumbered, and fighting an enemy that had already demonstrated the ability to inflict serious damage. More importantly, Every moment the battle continued weakened the Empire's position throughout the galaxy. "And if we refuse?" he asked. "Then, we finish what you started," Admiral Martinez replied simply. "Your fleet is powerful, but it's no match for 400 coalition ships operating within our defensive grid." The Lord Admiral looked around his bridge at officers who had served the Empire faithfully for centuries. They had come to Sol System expecting an easy victory and found themselves facing a coalition that could reshape galactic politics forever. "Admiral Martinez," he said finally, "humanity has proven itself worthy of respect. But this conflict is far from over. The Empire has resources that your coalition cannot imagine." "Perhaps," she acknowledged. "But the galaxy has seen that Draconians can be defeated. That knowledge will spread, and other species will find their courage." As if summoned by prophecy, new tactical data arrived from across the galaxy. Draconian fleets were facing resistance on dozens of fronts as species that had been passive for millennia suddenly discovered their will to fight. The Empire that had seemed unshakable 24 hours ago was facing the greatest crisis in its 3,000-year history. And it had all begun with humanity's refusal to accept subjugation. Lord Admiral Kithirathane stood silently on his bridge as the weight of galactic history settled around him. The tactical displays showed the impossible truth. His fleet was surrounded, outgunned, and facing an enemy that had transformed a simple punitive expedition into the catalyst for galactic revolution. "Communications," he commanded quietly. "Open a channel to Admiral Martinez." The human admiral's image appeared on the main display, her face showing the exhaustion of 36 hours of continuous combat operations. Behind her, the Luna Base Command Center buzzed with activity as human officers coordinated with coalition forces throughout the system. "Lord Admiral," she acknowledged with professional courtesy. "Admiral Martinez," he began, his voice carrying the weight of 3,000 years of Draconian tradition. "I find myself in a position I never anticipated. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that challenge everything we believed about galactic military science." He paused, studying the readouts that showed coalition fleets continuing to arrive at the edge of the Sol System. 400 ships had become 500, then 600. Species from across the galaxy were arriving to support humanity's stand. "The Draconian Empire accepts your terms," he announced formally. "We will withdraw from Sol System space and acknowledge human sovereignty." A cheer went up from the human personnel visible in the background of Admiral Martinez's transmission, but she maintained her professional composure. "Lord Admiral, we appreciate your wisdom in avoiding further bloodshed. Coalition escorts will guide your fleet to the system's edge." "Before we depart," Lord Admiral Kithirathane said, "I must understand something. How did you know we would come? How did you prepare for an enemy you had never faced?" Admiral Martinez allowed herself a slight smile. "Lord Admiral, humans have been studying galactic politics for 50 years. We've watched your empire's expansion methods, analyzed your military tactics, and learned from every species you've conquered. We knew that eventually, you would come for us. So you built the solar defense grid specifically to counter Draconian capabilities," he observed. "We built it to level the playing field," she corrected. "Your ships are individually superior to ours in every category except one, adaptability. The solar defense grid forces you to fight on our terms rather than yours." The Lord Admiral nodded slowly. "And the coalition? How did you coordinate their response so quickly?" "We didn't," Admiral Martinez admitted. "Humanity sent a simple message to every species in the galaxy. We're fighting for the right to determine our own destiny. We're not asking for help, but we're offering hope. If we can stand against the Draconian Empire, then other species can choose freedom as well." "You used our attack as a catalyst for rebellion," he realized. "We used your attack as a demonstration of possibility," she replied. "For 3,000 years, the galaxy has believed that resistance to superior force was futile. We proved that determination and ingenuity could overcome raw power." As the Draconian fleet began its withdrawal under coalition escort, Lord Admiral Kithirathane reflected on the profound changes that 36 hours of combat had brought to galactic civilization. The empire that had seemed eternal was facing challenges on dozens of fronts as suppressed species found their courage. The journey to the edge of the Sol System took 6 hours, during which coalition ships from across the galaxy arrived to bear witness to the Draconian withdrawal. The symbolism was unmistakable. The era of unquestioned Imperial dominance was ending. "My Lord Admiral," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving final transmissions from Admiral Martinez." "Put her through," he commanded. Admiral Martinez appeared on the display one final time, her exhaustion now tempered with quiet satisfaction. "Lord Admiral, before you depart, I want you to understand something important. This wasn't about defeating the Draconian Empire. This was about proving that defeat was possible." "Explain." "Your empire has maintained control through the perception of invincibility," she said. "Species surrendered rather than face certain destruction. But today, the galaxy watched Draconian ships take damage from primitive human weapons. They saw your fleet trapped and forced to withdraw. That perception of invincibility is broken forever." Lord Admiral Kithirathane understood the implications immediately. Military strength was only part of Imperial control. Fear and psychological dominance were equally important, and both had been severely compromised. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now the galaxy chooses its own path," Admiral Martinez replied. "Some species will seek independence. Others will form new alliances. The age of forced unity under Imperial rule is ending. And humanity's role in this new galaxy?" Admiral Martinez considered the question carefully. "Will be what we've always been, a species that refuses to accept limitations. We'll explore, create, defend, and dream of better futures. The difference is that now, other species will have the same opportunity." As the Draconian fleet reached the edge of the Sol system, long-range sensors detected the scope of the revolution that humanity had inspired. Across the galaxy, species that had been dormant for centuries were declaring independence. New alliances were forming. Technologies that had been suppressed were being redeveloped. The Andromedan Alliance had formally withdrawn from Draconian influence and was offering mutual defense pacts to smaller species. The Vegan Collective was sharing advanced manufacturing techniques with former Draconian client states. Even the Ursine Confederacy, traditional allies of the Empire, were reconsidering their position. "Sir," the science officer reported, "preliminary analysis suggests that 47% of Draconian client states are now in various stages of rebellion or independence movements." Lord Admiral Kithirathane absorbed this information with the stoicism of a professional soldier. The Empire would survive, but it would be fundamentally changed. The age of expansion through intimidation was ending, replaced by something more complex and uncertain. 3 months later, the Galactic Council convened for its first session since the Battle of Sol. The chamber looked dramatically different from the gathering that had mocked human pretensions to sovereignty. Where once there had been empty seats for developing civilizations, now there were delegations from dozens of newly independent species. Ambassador Sarah Chun took her place at the podium, no longer representing a curiosity, but speaking for the leader of the Sol Defense Coalition. The galaxy listened with respect rather than amusement as she addressed the assembly. "Honored delegates," she began. 3 months ago, humanity stood alone against overwhelming odds. Today, we stand among equals in a galaxy that has rediscovered the value of courage over convenience. The chamber was silent as delegates absorbed the magnitude of change that had swept across known space. The rigid hierarchy that had defined galactic politics for millennia had been replaced by a more fluid system of alliances and mutual cooperation. "The Draconian Empire remains a significant power," Ambassador Chun continued, "and we bear them no hatred for their actions. They were acting according to the logic of their time. But that time has passed. The galaxy has chosen a different path." Lord Zephyr Thane, the Draconian representative, rose to address the assembly. His species' natural arrogance had been tempered by recent events, though their dignity remained intact. "The Draconian Empire acknowledges the new realities of galactic politics," he announced formally. "We withdraw all claims to sovereignty over the Sol system and recognize the independence of coalition member species." It was a historic moment. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Draconian Empire was publicly acknowledging limitations to its power. Furthermore, Lord Zephyr Thane continued, The Empire proposes a new framework for galactic governance based on mutual respect rather than dominance hierarchies. The proposal that followed would reshape galactic civilization for generations to come. Instead of a handful of dominant species ruling over client states, the new framework established equality among all spacefaring civilizations. Disputes would be resolved through negotiation rather than force. Trade would be conducted on mutually beneficial terms rather than extraction relationships. Most importantly, the new system included provisions for protecting developing civilizations from interference by established powers. The principle that humanity had fought to establish, the right of species to determine their own destiny, became the foundation of galactic law. A year after the Battle of Sol, Admiral Rebecca Martinez stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Sol Station, watching ships from across the galaxy arrive and depart on peaceful missions. The massive orbital facility served as headquarters for the Sol Defense Coalition and a symbol of humanity's emergence as a galactic power. Admiral, her aide announced, the Draconian ambassador is requesting permission to board. Grant permission, Admiral Martinez replied with interest. It would be her first face-to-face meeting with a member of the species that had once threatened to destroy humanity. Lord Admiral Kithirathane, now serving as a diplomatic representative rather than a military commander, entered the observation deck with the measured dignity of his species. The months since his defeat at Sol had changed him, tempering his natural arrogance with hard-earned wisdom. Admiral Martinez, he said formally, I come bearing a message from the Imperial High Command. I'm listening, she replied. The Empire wishes to propose a mutual defense pact between Draconian forces and the Sol Defense Coalition, he announced. Recent events have demonstrated that the galaxy faces threats that no single species can address alone. Admiral Martinez studied the former enemy, who had become an unlikely ally. The galaxy had indeed revealed new dangers as the rigid Imperial structure collapsed. Pirate fleets were raiding former client worlds. Unknown species from distant galaxies had begun probing known space. Criminal organizations were exploiting the chaos of political transformation. What kind of threats? She asked. Long-range sensors have detected massive fleet movements beyond the galactic rim, Lord Admiral Kithirathane explained. Unknown vessels with technology signatures that match no known species. The Empire's expansion may have attracted attention from powers we cannot yet comprehend. The implication was sobering. Humanity had fought to free the galaxy from Draconian dominance, only to discover that the galaxy itself might face threats from beyond. And you believe cooperation is necessary to face these threats? Admiral Martinez asked. I believe that the courage your species demonstrated at Sol will be needed again, he replied. The galaxy has learned that determination can overcome superior force. That lesson may prove vital in the challenges ahead. Admiral Martinez looked out at the stars visible through the observation deck's transparent aluminum windows. Humanity had fought for the right to choose its own destiny, and that choice had led to galactic transformation. Now they faced the possibility that their newfound freedom would require defending once again. Lord Admiral, she said finally, humanity will always stand against those who would impose their will through force. If these new threats prove hostile, they'll discover what the Draconian Empire learned, that some principles are worth any price to defend. The former enemies shook hands in the human manner, sealing an alliance that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Outside the station, ships from dozens of species worked together to patrol the galaxy's borders, united by the principle that had begun with humanity's refusal to surrender, the belief that freedom was worth fighting for, no matter the odds. The galaxy that had once mocked Earth's pretensions to independence now looked to humanity for leadership in defending the principles they had established through blood and determination. The species that had been dismissed as primitive newcomers had become the guardians of galactic freedom. And, in the distant reaches of space, unknown forces prepared their own tests of courage, unaware that they would soon face a galaxy united by the lesson that Earth had taught, that the strongest weapon in the universe was the refusal to surrender hope.